So this is a true story. You're not going to believe this. But do not do this. Do not try this at home. Do not try this at home. Okay, this is wrong. What I'm telling you that I did was wrong. I mean, this is 6 months ago. I'm in shul. A guy comes over to me after davening, who never comes to my shul. He was there because he was actually sitting shiva, and he was eating at his sister's house. So this is what I did to a guy in the middle of shiva. Comes over to me, he says, "Rabbi," and I know him a little bit. He comes over to me, "Rabbi, that was a wonderful sermon, but what you should have said," and I said, "Let me stop you right there. Let me understand this conversation. You've never been here before. You have no idea what I spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago. Yet you feel you have the credentials necessary to advise me on what I should have said. I wouldn't advise doing this, behaving this way. But you're a rabbi for 40 years. You can, you can be less restrained."
Rabbi Reuben Poupko is rabbi of Beth Israel Beth Aaron in Montreal, Canada. His father was a rabbi.
Everything I am or hope to be is only because of how I grew up. And my father was a rabbi in Pittsburgh for over 60 years.
And his grandfather was a rabbi too.
He was Rav in Velizh, Russia. He had to speak twice a year on Shabbos HaGadol and Shabbos Shuvah.
After 43 years in the rabbinate, Rabbi Poupko recognizes very well the dilemma that pulpit rabbis face every time they get up to speak.
We're expected to speak a lot. And if you're in a shul a long time with the same people who are subjected to you every single week, it's not easy.
So how does a rabbi go about keeping his congregation interested and engaged? By being a lifelong learner.
So you got to keep learning. You got to keep learning. The more you learn, the more you have to offer. That's the crucial thing.
Rabbi Poupko sees the role of the sermon as multifaceted. Sometimes you're there to teach, but sometimes you're not teaching your kahila anything new, but rather you're giving expression to what's in their hearts.
You want to be the public validator of their own feelings and their own heartbreak, right? You are their voice.
In this episode of the Maggid Method, we're treated to over 4 decades worth of public speaking wisdom, rabbinic advice, and unbelievable true stories.
I've never seen something like this before. Your kids came in before Yom Tov, right, to pay the bills. That's a beautiful story.
We talk about the best speaking tone for delivering a drasha.
You're talking to people. Remember that. You're talking to. It's a conversation. And you have to talk naturally.
How to encourage better behavior.
I have never gotten up and said, you people haven't given enough money, give more money. Never say that. The way I get people to give is I get up in shul 3 weeks before Pesach and I say, I want to thank all the people who have responded so generously. And everybody else feels guilty. And that's it.
Which order you should speak at a funeral.
Today, there were 800 members of the family who are going to speak also. They all get up and talk. So I always speak after them. I never speak first. I always speak last.
And when to accept that some things will just never change.
I mean, some rabbis decided it's their life's mission to make sure nobody goes to Kiddush Club. But let's be blunt. We all have people in our shul who wouldn't come unless they had the Kiddush Club.
I learned, laughed, and even cried during my interview with Rabbi Reuben Poupko. And I'm sure you will too. So now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Rabbi Reuben Poupko.
Hey, nice to see you. Nice to meet you. How you doing? You're in Columbus? Where are you?
Columbus, Ohio. Snowy Columbus, Ohio.
Is the Yankee Farms team still in Columbus?
No. The Clippers. They're. I think it's the Blue Jays farm team now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, it was the Yankees. All right. So what do you want to talk about?
I had an interview with Rabbi Ariel Rakovsky of Dallas, Texas.
Yeah, sure. Nice guy.
And he told me, he said, I think I quoted you what he said. He said that
I'm the best speaker in the world. It's true.
Yeah. So I want to know the secret. I want to know the background. I want to know the everything that goes into it, and advice that you have.
All right, feel free to interrupt anytime.
Okay, I'm going to shut up and let you have the floor.
Okay, I'll tell you. Listen, I'm in awe of rabbis who do well and didn't grow up the way I grew up, because everything I am or hope to be is only because of how I grew up. Watching my father. And my father was rabbi in Pittsburgh for over 60 years, and he was an incredible speaker. So I learned everything, nearly everything I have and know and do is only because I had ongoing training from the time I'm a baby. So I attribute overwhelmingly to my father's model. Um, that's one part of this. And however, that doesn't mean I am unable to give advice or understand the craft a little bit. I mean, I've been a rabbi since I don't know 80. What's about 30? What is it? 30? I don't know how many years. 40 years. Well, I don't know how many years is that. Oh my
Yeah.
God, it's 43 years. Yes, I've been a rabbi for 43 years. It's a long time, and so I've been doing this a long time. And listen, when you'll see a picture of my grandfather behind me. He was Rav in Velizh, Russia. He had to speak twice a year on Shabbos Hagadol and Shabbos Shuvah, and that was it. And then he became rabbi in America, and the world changed. But the reality is, we rabbis talk a lot. We talk an enormous amount. On a regular Shabbos, any normal rabbi is maybe giving a Devar Torah between Kabbalah Shabbos and Ma'ariv, is getting up Shabbos morning, maybe giving a shir before davening, speaking at during davening, giving a shir in the afternoon, is speaking again at Shalosh Shudas. We are highly overexposed. And if you're lucky, in a good year, you have maybe, I don't know, two new ideas, maybe. So it's tough. I mean, we're expected to speak a lot. And again, we're not always speaking. I mean, teaching is obviously different than speaking, but we're overexposed. We are remarkably overexposed. And if you're in a shul a long time with the same people who are subjected to you every single week, it's not easy. It's not easy. We all know a lot of rabbis become almost part of the furniture, where the people just tune them out because they've heard them over and over again. And it's tough. It's tough to keep people engaged. It's tough, to be interesting all the time. It's a challenge. So the first thing is, I'll talk about substance, then I'll talk about style. In terms of substance, you got to keep learning. I mean, and it means everything. It means you got to keep learning because, whenever you learn, there's always something new, and you got to keep learning. It's the only way. You got to learn Gemara. You got to learn Medrash, a lot of Medrash. You got to learn a lot of Medrash. There's stuff there that is unbelievable that, yeshiva guys don't always, see. And you got to learn a lot. Other than Parshas Nasai, going through all of Medrash Rabbah before Shabbos is not a bad idea. And Medrash Tanchuma and, the Psiktas and everything else. It's a good idea. There's wonderful Svarim that are a likud of Midrashim. I mean, the best is obviously Rabbi Kasher and Torah Shlema. It is underused and undervalued. It is an incredible work, the Torah Shlema. It's on Chamishe Chumshe Torah, besides Devarim. He didn't finish. He got through Bamidbar. And it's remarkable. Not only the Midrashim, without the benefit of a computer, he knew everything. And it was malak at everything. It's an incredible work. And you'll read 30 Midrashim and you'll find one. But it's worth it. And his notes are incredible on the Torah Shlema. HebrewBooks.org has it all online. You don't have to own the hard copies anymore, although it is useful on Shabbos. And the Torah Shlema is incredible. I mean, I still use my father's Torah Shlema, so I know I have his check marks and underlinings, which is a wonderful thing. But it's a great thing. The Torah Shlema is incredible work. But it's a simple, old-fashioned Medrash Rabbah is pretty good. So you got to keep learning. You got to keep learning. The more you learn Gemara, the more you learn Medrash, the more you learn, the more you have to offer. That's the crucial thing. On style, I'll tell you, when I first became a rabbi, I drove around in my old Chevy Caprice, and I had a tape deck because it was the ancient days. There was a tape deck, and whenever I was in the car, I was listening to the speeches of John F. Kennedy. Because I had read that John F. Kennedy learned how to speak by listening to Winston Churchill. So the albums, in those days, it was a record album of Churchill's speeches. What you learn by listening to good speakers is you learn cadence, you learn structure, you learn a lot of things. There's a lot to learn and also in substance, but certainly in style. And there's a lot to learn, and it's very useful. I know some people go to public speaking classes. I never have. I don't know if they're worthwhile. I really don't know. But what I do know is listening is a great way to learn how to talk, and listening is important, and listen to good speakers. You know what I mean? I wouldn't suggest anybody should learn how to speak by listening to audio shiurim on VBM or YU. That there's a lot of Torah there, but I wouldn't suggest learning style there. I would learn style Chachma Bagayim. This is a Chachma, and to listen to John F. Kennedy is worthwhile. Listening to Winston Churchill is worthwhile. Listening to great orators helps. The other thing is, listen, most of the time I'm in my own shul, so I don't hear other rabbis talk. Okay, I hear myself, but I travel, so I hear other rabbis talk. I go to chasanas, I go to levayas, so I hear other rabbis talk. And not all of them are very good. Some of them are excellent. Not all of them are good at it. And not always is my judgment infallible. Just because I don't think it's good doesn't mean other people don't think it's good. So the one thing I tell you, one of the mistakes I see young rabbis make. Oh, by the way, I have a joke for you. I was a young rabbi once. And at that time, I was in a suburb of Toronto, and I used to go to the rabbinical meetings in Toronto. And it was in the 80s, and there's still old European rabbis around. And the old Rabbi Felder Zatzal once made a disparaging comment about younger rabbanim, younger rabbis. Right? So I asked him in Yiddish, I said to him, when does a young rabbi become an older rabbi? And without missing a beat, he said that a fangt on hasen younger rabbanim, when he starts hating younger rabbis. So in the light of that story, I will. Sometimes I hear younger rabbis talk, and one of the things that it irks me. I'm not sure it really bothers anybody else, but if I would give, a young rabbi will get up and say, I was reading a Rashi on the Parsha, and it bothered me. I couldn't sleep at night, and I was thinking about it. Nobody cares. Nobody cares. I don't need to hear what bothered you. Just get up and talk. Don't talk about talking. Just talk. Right? Right? Like, it bothered me, and I was asked this, it bothered me. No, nobody cares. Nobody cares. Okay? Just get up and talk. Just get up and say something. Also, the other advice I would give is, the more you care about what you're saying, the more eloquently and passionately you will deliver it. Don't look at other people's works, look at other people's sermons, but don't get up and parrot them. If you want to look at an old sermon from somebody or an old drasha from somebody, and I'll look at stuff. I'll look at stuff to look for sources. This kind of stuff. But to go ahead, you have to be yourself. It's the old Yiddish expression, the best lie is the truth. Just be yourself. Talk to people, okay? Talk to them. You're having a conversation with people when you speak, right? So you look them in the eye. Talk to them about things you care about. And if you care about it, they will care. And there are different kinds of sermons, and you shouldn't give the same kind of sermon every week, but you talk about things you care about. That means something to you, right? And it's not a sterile experience. It's a visceral experience, the sermon, right? It is. And it has to be something you care about. Don't try to be anybody else. Just be yourself. Be comfortable in your own skin. Be comfortable with your own ideas. Be comfortable with what you have to say. And that's what matters most. Listen, when I say there are different kinds of sermons, there will be times when you will get up in front of a kehillah on Shabbos morning, and you want to teach them something, right? And that's great. Teaching is great. And that's wonderful. That's fine. That's should be, well, a lot of your time should be doing that. But there are also times when you want to get up and give voice to what they're feeling. You want to be the public validator of their own feelings and where they're at, right? To get up after October 7th, for instance, you're not telling them things they don't know. They know everything, especially today. When my father was a Rav, it was different. Not everybody knew everything. Today, everybody knows everything. Everybody has access to the same information, right? Everybody sees everything. But you want to give voice to what they're feeling. You're their voice. And you want to, and that's what you're doing. You're not teaching them. Maybe you're giving them chizuk, maybe. But the point is, how do you give chizuk? Right? By reaffirming their own passions, and their own feelings, and their own heartbreak. Right? You are their voice. Right? So that's part of what we do. It is part of what we do. Right? We give voice to what they're already feeling. Also, I think it's also important to be positive. What I mean by that is, I don't know. Let's say you're raising money for something in the shul or in Israel, whatever. Mos Chitim before Pesach. I don't know. Whatever it is, you're raising money, right? I have never gotten up and said, you people haven't given enough money, give more money. Never say that. The way I get people to give is I get up in shul 3 weeks before Pesach and I say, I want to thank all the people who have responded so generously. Right? And everybody else feels guilty, and that's it. Right? That's what you do. Right? There are simple ways to do things with more seichel. Right? Right? That will inspire much more generosity than getting up and it's certainly not insulting, but even encouraging. Thank the people who gave. Right? Do a positive thing. You want to talk about chinuch and what parents should do and shouldn't do with their kids. Get up and praise the positive choices. Don't highlight the negative choices. Highlight the idea that, you've been a rabbi, you've seen families, and you say, the girls that daven so nicely are the girls and boys who sat with their parents. Right? You can see, or the kid's bar mitzvah, or the kid's has an ofruf, and you talk about, you always sat with. So you're not telling the idiots who let their kids run around, how terrible they are, but you're praising the positive. You're sending a message in a much more effective way, right, and a nicer way. It has to be more effective, right? If you sit with, you have to strike a positive pose. That's what I've always felt, And in other words, positive validation is more effective than anything else. You get, listen. Also, it means accepting the things that will never change. I know it sounds like Alcoholics Anonymous, but you have to accept the things that don't change. Some rabbis decided it's their life's mission to make sure nobody goes to Kiddush Club. Let's be blunt. We all have people in our shul who wouldn't come unless they had the Kiddush Club. So I don't make an issue about everything, even things that bother me deeply, right? Because you have to know which battles to fight, which battles not to fight. If they want to go out during the Haftarah and during Yom Kippur and they only walk in 6 minutes late for the sermon, you're lucky. At least they're coming to your house to do that. You don't have to fight everything. I think it's another thing. I don't know. What else should we talk about? You have any questions?
Yeah, I'm curious about your process. Obviously, after having done this for 40 years, you probably have you have it down. But what typically would be when you used to have to prepare more? What would be your process for preparation?
I would say about on Wednesday or Thursday, I will say, what's the parsha this week? Right. That's very important to know the parsha. And I'll say, and I'll what I'll do is I will. You always forget things, So it's a good idea to be Maver Sedra. It really is. So you read through the Parsha. Very important. Read through the Parsha. Because there's stuff there you forgot. There is. There's always something. There's always, or something that never struck you before that will strike you. There always is. I mean, no matter how old you get, there's always a new question, a new thing. And then what you do is you get a couple ideas in your head about what you might want to talk about. And then you continue your process, which is learning. You open up the Medrash, you open up this, and then if you already have an idea in your head about what you might want to talk about, let's say something happened in Israel, let's say there's something in the Kehillah, right? You already have an idea of what you want to talk about, and then you will learn the Medrash or the Parsha or the Gemara through the prism of that idea. And you will always find something that relates to it. In other words, have the idea first, right, about what you basically want to talk about. It can change. I'm not telling you this is a foolproof, but have an idea in your head what you want to talk about, and then read the parsha, read the medrash through the prism of what you want to talk about, and you'll always find it. Almost always find.
It doesn't feel forced.
No, it's listen. Sometimes it's remarkably easy. Sometimes it's more challenging. But it's, you have to, if you have an idea in your head of what you want to talk about, you're okay. And don't be afraid to be machadish also. I mean, you shouldn't be afraid of saying something no one's ever said before. It's okay. It's all right. And by the way, there are very few things. I mean, I've had this experience many times where I've said something which I think no one has ever said before. Right, and then I'll find it 6 years later somewhere else. Right, right. I'll find some wacky, obscure medrash or some drasha written by somebody. Very few things, but it's yours though. It's your chiddush because you didn't hear it from anybody. If you ask me for an example, let's talk about Shabbos. Let's talk about Parshas Bay. We're going into Parshas Bay. Okay? We're going into Parshas Bay. So, what do you talk about Parshas Bay? We've all talked about Pesach how many times in our lives? 45,000 times. So, what possible new thing could you possibly say about the Makos or about Pesach? What could you possibly have new to say or to think about? What is there? What is there? So obviously you have a problem because, in some ways the most poetic part of the Parsha is a Chodesh Lachem Rosh Chodashim. The problem with that is you already did the Parsha Chodesh, right? So you have a whole Shabbos about it, right? So but the other part of it is, we're dealing at a time of conflict. Obviously, war is going on. People are suffering, and one of the things that you might want to say on a Shabbos like this is, a remarkable thing. We take it for granted as Jews because we've been living with this since we're kids, but it's remarkable. Here you have the Jews are still in Egypt; they're still there, and a Kodesh Baruch Hu comes and says, "Have his Pesach Seder." All right, have a Pesach Seder right now. Have a Pesach Seder. Much of what was done in Pesach Mitzrayim, we still do. We still eat matzah. We have a mar. We still talk to our kids and answer their questions. We do all this stuff, and which ingrained in us a sensitivity to history that played itself out in many different ways. But it's this historical self-awareness to understand the moment in which you're living. The moment in which you're living. Appreciate the moment in which you're living. Right? And that's why in the Holocaust people wrote diaries. That's why we are always, while events were unfolding, we recorded them. While they were unfolding, we imagined the future and how it will be remembered. That's a remarkable capacity, right? The idea of history being sacred, right? That the story of our people is holy. And we need mechanisms for memory. We're going through a horrible event now, right? A terrible war. We're over 100 days. Korbanos keep mounting. It's terrible. But do what's recorded in Parshas Bay. Think now how your children are going to tell the story. Think now about that. Think right now how your children are going to tell their children about living through this period. Think about that right now. That's what Parshas Bo is about. Think now about that. Think about the stories they're going to tell about a mother who raised money for an army unit, right? About a father who went to shul and davened, right? About the rallies, about what we did, to contribute, to visit, to help, right? Think now about those memories. Think now, right? And then that's an important message, right? We're right now. You're creating the memories and the stories that are going to be told in your family for another 100 years. Right now, you're creating those stories, and that's something that is meaningful to talk about. People relate to that. Everybody sitting in front of you, right, has a story, depending on how old they are, about remembering how their parent reacted during the Six-Day War, the Yom Kippur War, during Lebanon, during the Aliyah of Soviet Jews, during the Ethiopian period, during the Intifada, right, depending on how old they are. They all remember things, right? They all have a memory of a parent and the response, the memory of a community, of a rabbi and the response. They all remember that, right? And now you're telling them, remember what you remember and make sure there's something to remember, right? Remember there's a story that has to be told. And to be sensitive to that. I mean, that's a beautiful message. Now, is it a medrash? Absolutely not. No. I mean, you could work it into the medrash that says, V'haya kishalcha bincha b'sura toiva, whether it's good news or bad news, right? That medrash, whether or not, they're going to ask you because they don't know or because they care, V'haya kishalcha bincha macha, you can go on that. But you can talk about, Kiddush HaChayish again, that Kodesh Baruch Hu gives us power over time. This is how we express our power over time, right? This is our control of time. We determine what's going on here, right? Kodesh Baruch Hu was asked when Yontif is, and he says, ask the Jews, right? In other words, we're in control. We are going to determine how this moment looks, right? We determine that, right? So you can certainly link it to Midrashim and all of that, but that's a beautiful message on Parshas Bo. And that's something you care about. And it's something they care about. They care about how they're going to be remembered. You care about this deeply, right? And if you speak about things you care about, it works. But when you get up there scratching your ear saying, I read a Rashi and it bothered me. I couldn't sleep and it was bothering me. Nobody cares. It bothered you, leave me alone. It doesn't bother me.
What are some of the other kind of messages, let's say in a less dramatic time that we're living in, that you find yourself coming back to?
Obviously there are great themes in Jewish life, right? Themes of Jewish survival, resilience, resurrection of sovereignty. There are beautiful stories to be told. But then there are everyday stories that need to be told. And those are stories about, inspiring stories of basic chesed, those are important stories to tell. Very important stories to tell. I mean, I just, not long ago, I was talking about, there's a wonderful guy in my shul whose father was a wonderful Baal Tzedakah in a very quiet and almost a unique way. His father had come from Europe. He used to go into the bakery before Yontif and go to the guy. He says, "Give me your book," meaning the people owe you money, and he would sit there and pay off everyone's bill, never tell anybody. Okay, give me your book, he would say, and he would pay the bills for other people. His son does the same thing. Goes into certain stores and does that. And then he tells me a story about how he was at a wedding in New York. The caterer also owned a takeout store on the Upper West Side. He figured out who he was, and he tells the guy, he has 2 kids living in New York. I've never seen something like this before. Your kids came in before Yontif, right, to pay the bills. That's a beautiful story. And that's about 2 things. That's about tzedakah, and that's about the things we see our parents do, how long they last, how long they echo, and we underestimate and undervalue our impact on the people around us and even on our own children, and what that does, the modeling of good behavior, and something like that. These are valuable things about people need to value their own the impact they have, and people don't always do that. Both for the good and bad. I mean, we know that. And but it's important. I mean, to talk about chesed and those things are important. But it's important to do it in a positive way, and to highlight the positive impact, to highlight the inspirational moments, not to get up and just insult the bad guys, which is fun occasionally. But it's better to praise the good.
Hey there, fellow podcast listeners. There's a secret that great public speakers know. Did you know there's a method for cutting straight through to an audience's heart, grabbing their attention and holding it, and making a memorable impact with your presentation? The best speakers in the world utilize it, and now you can too, every time you get up to speak. Download your free Maggid Method of Public Speaking template at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. The Maggid Method will teach you how to find your authentic voice, craft meaningful presentations, manage people's attention, and build unbreakable bonds with your audience. Go to maggidmethod.com and download your free copy now. Now let's get back to the program.
But it also means being a little creative. I mean, I don't know. I spoke last. Akedas Yitzchak is always a big subject. Rosh Hashanah, obviously. So Akedas Yitzchak is probably the most captivating story, right? So I'll tell you how I got up and talked about it. Okay. Especially Rosh Hashanah, you have to be funny, because if you're not going to make a joke on Yom Adin, when are you going to make a joke? So I get it. Rosh Hashanah, I get it. I go. You read Akedas Yitzchak, right? I remember, and it's true, it's a true story. I remember learning it the first time I was in second grade, learning Akedas Yitzchak, and so a guy's told to kill his son, and he goes ahead and he takes his son, lifts up a knife. I'll tell you, I went home for dinner that night. I looked at my father, and all I wanted to know was what he would have done, right? That's funny. I said, today, when you study it, you bring in a team of social workers. You make a joke, right? It's a horrific story, but it's funny in a way, right? And I'll tell you what I said. I gave what I thought was, as something occurred to me. And I said, let's read it as if we've never read it before. Let's do that. Let's learn some Chumash together like we've never read it before. Right? So what do you know about Avraham Avinu before you get to the story of the Cana? He's no shrinking wallflower. Right? God tells him about Sodom and Gomorrah, and he yells and screams. God tells him he's going to have a son named Yitzchak, and what does he say? Lu Yishmal Yachil Lefanecha. Right? He talks about Eliezer even at one point. He goes to war. He doesn't ask permission from God. Right? He takes the initiative. Right? All this stuff. He says, he questions God. Right? This is not, a guy going, please tell me what to do. Right? This is a guy who's fighting everybody and God himself. And then we're told, right? Right? And he says, take your only son. What do we expect Avraham Avinu to do? Anybody who knows anything about Avraham Avinu expects him to say, no. Ain't going to happen. You promised me this, right? That's even the Medrash says. Esmo, you told me, right? Hey, you told me, right? I mean, what are you doing? You would have said no. I want to tell you something. I said something that you might think is heretical. I said, I want to tell you something. It says Hashem Nisas Avraham. HaKadosh Baruch Hu also expected Avraham Avinu to say no. Because that would have been the only consistent thing. Avraham Avinu was asked to reject his whole life right now. He was against child sacrifice. His whole life was about having Yitzchak and having a future of the Jewish people. He was being asked to destroy all the Jews in the world. That's what he was being asked to do. He was asked to kill the knowledge of God's presence in the world. That's what he was killing, if he would kill Yitzchak. So of course we expect him to say no. God expected him to say no. You know what Avraham Avinu did? And this is for us, myself is similar about him. He did it. He took his son Because what he was saying to God was, I've done enough. You have to save the child, not me. You have to do it. This is my salvation labanim. And at a certain point in Jewish history, we have the right to turn to God and say, we've done enough. We've done enough. We did this, I'm not going to go through the whole litany that you know as well as I know, whatever it was, exile, Khurban, Crusades, Inquisition, pogrom, the Holocaust. We've done enough. Kodesh Baruch Hu, it's your turn now. That's what happened. Right? The miracle of Eretz Yisrael. It's your turn now.
Powerful.
That's a great drasha. You can delete this from the podcast and use it yourself next year. But that's a great drasha. I have to think it's a great drasha.
So let me ask you, it's been said that you've never written down a word.
I wrote down my bar mitzvah speech, not since. But again, that's my thing. I wouldn't necessarily suggest that. What I would certainly urge is no one should ever read from a text. Okay? Drasha's not that long. It's 12 minutes these days. I mean, how long is a drasha? You can remember what you want to say. Yes, you should write down the medrash or have the sefer in front of you, right? You're allowed to look down occasionally. You can, if there's a particular order of things, it's not a bad idea to have 4 points on a piece of paper in front of you, but I never write down a text. No, I never speak from a text. I don't think, again, as I said, you're talking to people. Remember that, you're talking to, it's a conversation. They're not allowed to talk, but it's a conversation. It is a conversation, and you have to talk naturally. Don't talk in a stilted voice, a put-on voice. Talk in your own voice. Do it with, in a structured way, in a creative way, but it's a conversation. It's fundamentally a conversation. It's one-sided, but it's a conversation. Talk to people like they're there. They're sitting at your Shabbos table. Just talk to them. That's all you're doing. And also very important, this is something I certainly learned from my father, is respect your audience. Right? You have to have respect for them. I'm not telling you always have to be speak to the intellectuals in the audience, but what I'm saying is respect them, that they know things, that they understand things, and that they deserve to hear something that's honest and good. You have to have derech eretz for the audience. You have to have derech eretz for Klal Yisrael. Which means you don't engage in cheap demagoguery, you don't engage in manipulation, you talk straight. You talk straight. And it's you have to have derech eretz for Klal Yisrael. You really do. And listen, I'm not perfect in that. I mean, I can be as cantankerous as the next guy at times with people. I'll tell you a funny story. This is things you should not do as a rabbi. This is under that heading. Because I've been around so long, I have certain freedoms that maybe others don't. So this is a true story. You're not going to believe this. But do not do this. Do not try this at home. Do not try this at home. Okay, this is wrong. What I'm telling you that I did was wrong. I mean, this is 6 months ago. I'm in shul. A guy comes over to me after davening, who never comes to my shul. He was there because he was actually sitting shiva, and he was eating at his sister's house. So this is what I did to a guy in the middle of shiva. Comes over to me, he says, "Rabbi," and I know him a little bit. He comes over to me, "Rabbi, that was a wonderful sermon, but what you should have said." And I said, "Let me stop you right there. Let me understand this conversation. You've never been here before. You have no idea what I spoke about last week or 2 weeks ago. Yet you feel you have the credentials necessary to advise me on what I should have said." Right? He just walked away. So, yes, I don't, most rabbis would just simply say, listen politely and think whatever they're thinking and just extricate themselves from the conversation. But I've now assumed a new role in my life. I've decided it's my job to teach Jews etiquette as well. I had a guy. This is a true story. I was at it was a bar mitzvah show, so I'm in the lobby after davening, and a guy who I kind of know, but it was there for the bar mitzvah. He yells to me across the lobby in front of, I don't know, 50 people, "Rabbi, where's the bathroom?" So I walk over to the guy. I go, "Let me present the possible alternative way this conversation could have gone." I mean, nobody does this but me. So it's not right. I'm just telling you, I find it entertaining. I go, "Let me present an alternative way this conversation could have gone." "Rabbi, you could have walked over to me and said, 'Rabbi, good Shabbos, nice to see you. Beautiful services this morning. And by the way, where's the restroom?'" But again, that's not for everybody. I wouldn't advise behaving this way. But you're a rabbi for 40 years. You can, you can be less restrained. But yeah. So, but again, I think it's a general rule. These exceptions aside, it's important to have derech eretz for Klal Yisrael.
What are some of the more difficult speaking slots? Whether it's a hesped,
difficult what?
Speaking slots as a rabbi. Is it a hesped? Is it Shabbos?
Oh. I'll tell you about a hesped. You have to decide who you're speaking to at a hesped. This is a crucial thing. Who are you speaking to? Are you speaking to the Avelim, or are you speaking to the people sitting in front of you? I mean, the crowd. And that's the first decision. And I'm not telling you it's always the same thing. There's sometimes you want to speak to the Avelim. Sometimes I think mostly you want to speak to the Avelim. That's what, you know what I mean? So remember who you're talking to. That's an important thought to have in mind. Who are you talking to? And
what's the nafkamina? What's the difference between the Avelim and between the people gathered there for?
In other words, if you were thinking about the audience, you'd be talking more Torah maybe and less personal. So you want to talk to the Avelim, and it's important. It's important to think of it, just to think who you're talking to. You always try to do something. You all want to use some Torah, obviously, in a hesped. But I have to tell you, over the years, I think I'm doing that less and less. I mean, I always do it, but not as much. You know what I mean? Not as, I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in that, but I do less and less. I think you want to, every family is different. Every eulogy is different. But what you want to do, I think, is comfort the Avelim. You want to give derech eretz to the niftar, absolutely, and that's of vital importance. But to emphasize the continuity of what they live for, you want to emphasize also, this also helps Avelim. I mean, or maybe not, but I think it's important if they took particularly good care of a parent, to highlight that, to highlight what they did for the person. I always talk to grandchildren directly at a eulogy. I always talk about how proud they should feel about the nachas they gave to their Zayder or Baba. I always talk about that because grandchildren have their own, unique kind of pain and sense of dislocation. You want to make them feel proud of because they don't really appreciate that at that moment. It has to be said to them that they gave their Zayder and Baba a lot of joy in life. That's important. If there's an old mother who's now a widow, you want to say something like, "Don't worry, your family will always be with you," because they're frightened. They are. You're surrounded by love, hopefully. Say abandon her. But, in most cases, it's okay. You want to talk about how, "Don't worry, we're here for you." You want to reassure her. You want to talk about, Hakara Satov. You want to talk about gratitude that kids should feel for a parent. A lot of things you want to talk about in a hesped. And then again, most of the time, you're going to give a hesped for someone but there will be times you're giving a hesped for someone you have no idea who they are. You have no idea. Some rabbis feel it necessary in those situations to get up and say, "Although I didn't know him," I'm not sure that's necessary. You can imply it without saying that. I don't think it's necessary to announce it. I think you can say things, I heard from the family. You can say things like that. I spoke, the son spoke about, and therefore it implies that you didn't have direct knowledge, but you don't have to get up and nobody wants to hear that, right? Nobody wants to hear that. It doesn't help anybody. You want to tell, when you sit with the family before Levaya, you want to be able to channel what they're saying. Today, unfortunately, there are 800 members of the family who are going to speak also. That's the new thing. I mean, when I say new, I mean, whatever, it's been a while. They all get up and talk. I mean, it used to be all. I always speak after them. I never speak first. I always speak last. Because this way I know more about what they're saying, and I'm not preempting them. I can adjust to them easier than they can adjust to me. So I speak at the end, and you want to repackage, reiterate, and sometimes even and Jew it up, as I would put it, right? Put it in a more Jewish context, what they've said. And so it's important to listen to family before Levaya, what's important to them, to ask the right questions of the family, like what did you learn, that kind of thing. And it's important to be empathetic. I mean, it's and to feel it, and to if you care about the people, it's a lot easier. If you're not a sociopath, it's easier to speak at a funeral. Caring helps. Weddings. I tell you about weddings. Weddings are funny because, I don't know. I mean, the habits have changed a lot. I mean, I go to a chasanas, former weddings all the time where nobody speaks at a wedding, right? Where there won't be anybody talking under a chuppah. If you're talking under a chuppah, it can't be long. Remember, the poor bride has been tortured all day. They woke her up at 4 a.m. to put on her makeup and do her hair and do her nails. She was under the hot lights of a photographer all afternoon. If she's a frum girl, she has fasted. She's about to faint already. All right. And then they're calling up, the uncle in the wheelchair to give a bracha, and it takes them 20 minutes to get there. It's a horrible experience, okay? She has just had a fight with one of her bridesmaids and with her mother. It's not pleasant. I'm painting weddings as a wonderful experience, I know. So you want to be brief. You want to be brief. If you're close with the parents, you have to talk with the parents. You can't ignore the other side, because often you're only from one side. You have to say, to the chassid, you also come from this kind of family. Whatever. You want to talk. You want to obviously talk about the chassid and say something relevant about about shidduch. But I think the main thing with weddings is brief. No one should speak more than 5-6 minutes under a chuppah. Nobody. I mean, it's ridiculous otherwise. Nobody, when they were getting dressed to come to the wedding, thought with glee, gee, I get to hear a rabbi talk tonight. I'm so excited. That's not why they're there. Let's be blunt. Okay. So you can, if you're good, you can add a little bit to the simcha. If you're bad, that's all they'll talk about. So you want to be short and to the point.
Yeah. Tell me about the marathon of Shabbos Shuvah, Rosh Hashanah, Shabbos Shuvah, Yom Kippur, Yizkor, Nila, Nidre.
A friend of mine who was a rabbi in Long Island once said to me, he walked in, I think it was about Pesach, or maybe it was about Sukkot. He says he walked into Shul Shmini Atzeres. He looked around and he said, "You're still here?" I mean, it's a marathon. It's a crazy marathon what we do. It's insane what we do. It is enormously challenging. I remember walking home from shul with my father after Shmini Atzeres Yizkor, and the sense of relief, the burden that the last drasha of the marathon. It's a 3-week marathon. More. It's crazy what we do. It's crazy what we do. I mean, you get up in a normal year, you speak 2 days Rosh Hashanah, you speak Shabbos Shuvah, you give a Shabbos Shuvah drasha in the afternoon, then you have Kol Nidre, and you have Yom Kippur, you have Nila, it's insanity, the intensity. It's insanity. So I'll tell you what I always do. I told this to another rabbi. His retort to me was, "That's what's wrong with American rabbinate." So so that's the warning. When I said this to him, he told me that's what's wrong. I said, "Okay, I'll tell you, I have 4 drushes, Rosh Hashanah and Kippur, right? There's 4 drushes. big drushes, right? Besides all the stuff in Mincha Ma'ariv and everything else in the afternoon, right? 4 big drushes. So I say, it's very simple, I tell him. I mean, I said it a little callously, which is maybe why he reacted so negatively. I said, it's very simple. One day Holocaust, one day Israel, one day family, one day Yiddishkeit. It's very simple. What's the problem? Right? And I said it flippantly, but it's true. If you're speaking Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur, right, you're going to get up Yizkor Yom Kippur and you're going to talk about the Holocaust. You have to. That's a moral and ethical obligation. You have people in front of you who are the grandchildren of survivors. I still, Baruch Hashem, have a couple survivors in my show, but you got to talk about it. You have to, right? That's the ethical obligation. Anybody who lives in the shadow of Auschwitz, you have to. It's always different. It's always a different element, but you have to talk about it. You have to talk about Eretz Yisrael. You have to. And whether that's called Nidre or Rosh Hashanah, I don't know, but you got to talk about it. No matter what's going on in the world, whether it's the quietest year or not, you have to talk about Israel. All right, then you talk about something that actually means something to them on a personal level, which is family. You talk about, your family life, and then one day it's a simple old-fashioned Yiddishkeit drasha. That's my division in my head. Call me cynical, call me old-fashioned, but that's very simple to me. Those are the 4 basic things you want to talk about over Rosh Hashanah Yom Kippur.
And Shabbos Shuvah, what's your approach to that? I mean,
Shabbos Shuvah is chavrusa. I have good friends in the rabbinate, and I'll even mention their names. For years, the 3 of us, we still do it. We get together before Shabbos Shuvah and Shabbos Hagadol. A month before, one of us is more neurotic than the other 2, and we start early, and we all contribute, and we create a drasha together. I always did it together with Rabbi Hain, who recently retired in Long Island, and with Rabbi Taub, who recently, my partners have retired, but, one of them is still active, at least in Shabbos Shuvah. So we still do it. I mean, we've done it for over 40 years together. And every year before Rosh Hashanah, before Shabbos Shuvah and Shabbos Hagadol, for a month beforehand, one of us will suggest a topic, and then we all research, we come back, we work it out, and we do it together. And it's always good to have chavrusas in other cities. You don't have to worry about 2 rabbis in the same place, talking the same thing. So that's what I've always done. That's the process. At this point, there will be times I've been around long enough that I can look up an old drasha and do it again. But that's rare, because if you've done it before, it's not going to be that good. Or rework it, But that's the process with Shabbos Shuvah and Shabbos Hagadol. It's good to have chavrusa.
And what's the goal?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a very good question. I never even thought about that. What's the goal? The goal is to impress upon people what a Talmid Chacham you are. No, the goal is the goal is to say something new and different. To have a new way to look at the Pesach Seder, a new way to look at Tshuva, something new or something that was overlooked.
Right. I know there's different schools of thought. Some do pilpul and more lumdish, and then there'll be other people who are more, focused on changing behavior.
I always start with basic lumdus, a steer and a Rambam, whatever, a Gemara, or whatever. I always start with lumdus and end with a God, with a broader theme. Yeah, we always go, and it should flow seamlessly.
Got it. So tell me about how do you perceive today's attention spans? Do you think people's attention thresholds are going down?
It's terrible. That's why I'm saying. 50 years ago, Rabbi spoke for 20, 25 minutes on a Shabbos morning. You do that today, no one will want to hear. Also, I have to say something else about the sermons in general. It's not what people are looking for anymore. Right? In 1972, when a search committee, sat down to look for a rabbi, they were looking for an eloquent orator. They're not looking for that anymore. They're not. Let's be blunt. I'm a bit of a dinosaur in the importance that I ascribe to what I'm doing in the sermon. I am. I know that. I have sons who are rabbis, so I'm not out of touch with reality. People aren't looking for that today. They really aren't. They're looking for a friend. And I can say it in a disparaging way to self-justify, but that's the reality. The oratorical skills of a rabbi are no longer as important as they were. They aren't. They aren't valued the way they were. Um, so I forgot what the question was.
Meaning the attention spans of
Oh yeah,
people
the attention
today.
span. So
Yeah.
you speak shorter. If you're good, that which they didn't really care that much about, they will care about. But it's only one part of your rabbanus, and it shouldn't be. It's no longer. I don't know. Yeah, it was central. It's no longer central. The rabbanus used to be central. It used to be the sermon was central to your rabbanus. It's not anymore. There's a lot of guys out there who are wonderful rabbis who can't speak worth a dime, right? They really are wonderful guys who do a great job, right? And with people and with learning and with giving shiurim and whatever, pastoral, whatever they call it, all that stuff. And they're a good Pesach and everything else. It's not as central as it once was. Certainly not.
What do you?
I don't know. What do you think? I don't know.
I tend to agree. It seems to me that it's one slice of the pie, and maybe it used to be representative of more of the rabbinical figure, and now it's just another slice of the pie.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. It's not. Listen, I don't know. Listen, also listen. The world has changed so dramatically in my lifetime. In other words, I don't know what your shul's like in Columbus, but the typical Orthodox shul in 1972, right? You'd walk in there. Most of the people you met weren't Shomer Shabbos, right? In a typical Orthodox shul outside New York, right? They were there because it wouldn't matter what they were doing in their own lives. They wanted their shul to be what their shul always was. Okay. Which was a whole different kind of audience than we have today. A whole different audience. When I came to my shul in 1986, I was in Rabbanus before that, but when I came to this shul in 1986, 95% of the people in front of me were not Shomer Shabbos. Today, when I get up, one person isn't. It's a whole different world, right? Orthodox Jews no longer daven sitting next to a non-Orthodox Jew. It doesn't. You can't find. And I think that's a phenomenon that's pretty pervasive today in North America. You don't find the non-Shomer Shabbos in an Orthodox shul. So that changes what you're going to talk about. It has to. The concerns are different. The sensitivities are different. So in those days, it was a radically different experience speaking than it is today, right? Also, it makes it easier in many ways. You can use words and phrases you don't have to translate, right? Right? I don't know if you can say "kimle rabbi" without translating, but you can say a lot. You can say a lot that you don't have to translate. And every guy in front of you, 80% of them been in yeshiva. Right, so it's a different world. It's a radically different world. You can you can get up and tell. I can tell jokes today I couldn't tell 40 years ago. Right, I can get up and tell. Oh, this is a great joke. I just told it to somebody. It's in my mind. It's a stupid joke, but it's a 200-year-old joke. It's completely stupid, but it's funny. A rabbi's walking home from shul, Rosh Hashanah night. And he sees the window of one of his balabatim has the head of a pig on his table. And he bashes on the door. He says, "What are you doing with the head of a pig?" He says, "Rebbe, steht in Shulchan Aruch. It says in Shulchan Aruch, Eichlin Reish Kevis, eat the head of a lamb or davaracha." And, Jews will know that, that's when Jews in Europe talked about a pig, they called it a davaracha, right? So I can tell that joke. I couldn't tell it before.
On the flip side of that, there's jokes you can't tell anymore that you used to be able to tell, I would imagine.
Yes, yeah, that's for sure. Yeah, people are more sensitive. They have to be careful. You have to be careful. Although, yeah, I don't tell jokes that often. I'm very funny, but I don't tell jokes. It means I'll say something funny. It'll be off the cuff in the middle. It will be about what I'm saying. But getting up and telling jokes. I'll do it occasionally, but I it's rare. The last joke I told, I guess. Oh yeah, this is a great joke. There's an old man dying, He's in his bedroom upstairs. He's on his last legs. His son comes up to him to see him. How are you? How are you? And he says to his son, is that Ma's kugel I smell? He goes, yeah. He says, bring me, I want to eat her kugel one more time before I go. He goes downstairs to get a piece of kugel for his old sick father. He comes back up empty-handed. The father says to his son, where's the kugel? He said, Ma says she's saving it for the Shiva. Anyway, that's a great joke. Now, it's funny. That's a funny joke, right?
I've heard that joke, and my wife and I have this machloket about if the punchline is Ma says it's for after. So that's what I get the way you told it.
Saving it for the Shiva. I mean, there are some great old jokes. I mean, but no, but I'm very funny, but I'm always funny in the sermon, not as telling a joke.
Ad-lib.
Yeah.
Let me ask you, in terms of talking about your own personal life with the congregation, what do you, where do you fall into that school of thought? Do you share?
This goes back to what I said an hour ago, which was, I don't know how anybody does it who didn't grow up with it. In other words, I never thought there was anything, I always knew going in it was a 7-day, 24-hour, I never, I'm not one of those young rabbis who say I need a day off. I don't understand that. You know what it is. Going in, you know what it is, and your family knows what it is. And what's the most important thing for your kids? I'm very proud of the fact that all of my kids, in one way or another, are working in the Jewish world, and because they saw what I saw when I was a kid, which is parents who loved what they were doing and were proud of it and did it with joy. And if you do it with misery and complaint and bitterness, you end up with kids who aren't very happy about being Jewish, let alone, wanting to do what you do. If you do it with joy and happiness, as a sense with dedication, you'll always have nachas.
Yeah. And do you talk about your family or yourself in the sermon?
No. I'm assiduously careful not to. Let me explain what I mean by that. Yes, I'll reference them once in a while, rarely. But for instance, my son's in the Army now. He's 43 years old. Went in 2 months ago, and he's in the Army now. I've talked about the war every week since October 7th. I have never mentioned it. I had kids in Israel during the Intifada who were near explosions. I never mentioned. I called my daughter. I was worried. I hate it. It's, to me, it's exploitive. To me, it's it's just wrong. It's wrong. I'll tell people about it, but not in a sermon. I never will. I never will. I was so nervous the bomb went, and it happened to me all the time. You remember the Intifada? It was awful, right? I turned on CNN one Saturday night, and my son's standing behind the police barricade, right near a bombing, right? I never mentioned it. I'll never mention it. I'm a fanatic on that, and maybe I'm wrong, but I don't like the idea, oh my, personal. It's not about me. It's not about me. I won't do it. I won't do it. I mean, my son's in the North now. He told me, he's seen stuff and told me stuff. I won't do it. I won't talk about it. I won't talk about it. I won't. I mean, he's on my screensaver. I mean, he's a Rav in Yerushalayim, and he's my screensaver now, but here he is. That's Avi, right?
I have one last quick question.
Sure.
The question is, everybody struggles in some area when in their craft. One area where you felt you're proud of that you broke through, that you can look back and say, like, wow, I became successful. This thing was hard for me, and I was able to achieve some success in it. What area would that be for you?
I would say that everything I was bad at 40 years ago, I'm still bad at. I've improved nothing in my life. I'm more aware, but not necessarily better at it. No, seriously, is again what I said before. The rabbinate evolved from more of a public figure to more of a of a personal figure. It really has, from somebody, the leader of a community, representing a community, speaking to a community. It's more individualistic, and I've changed along with the times. I have, and you have to, and also it's the right thing to do. I mean, I blame Chabad for this, but as I blame them for many things, but I blame Chabad for this. In other words, this idea that the rabbi is always accessible, the rabbi is always there, the rabbi is your friend, that kind of that. In other words, the way I put it is, Judaism used to be wholesale, now it's retail. We used to be wholesale. We used to be wholesalers as rabbis. Now we're retailers.
Okay, that's a good quote to end on.
All right.
All right, Shkoach, thank you very much. Good Shabbos.
Have a good Shabbos.
You've been listening to The Maggid Method, and I'm Daniel Steinberg. Learn more about the Maggid Method at maggidmethod.com, maggidmethod.com. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.